For decades, the Iran-Israel rivalry has been a defining force in Middle Eastern politics, shaping alliances, fueling conflicts, and influencing the region's balance of power. This bitter struggle is not just about territory or resources, it's a clash of ideologies, ambitions, and visions for the future of the Middle East. The conflict has rarely played out on open battlefields. Instead, it's been fought mostly through proxies, shadowy networks, and covert operations, with both sides relying on intelligence, sabotage, and clandestine alliances to advance their interests. Iran's 1979 Islamic Revolution marked a turning point, casting Israel as a central adversary and rallying supporters around a new anti-Western vision. The revolution's leaders, especially Ayatollah Khomeini, made opposition to Israel a core part of their ideology. Over the years, Iran built a vast network of militias and armed groups, like Hezbollah in Lebanon and the Houthis in Yemen, aiming to encircle Israel and project power across the region. This strategy, known as the Ring of Fire, has kept Israel on constant alert. Israel, viewing Iran's nuclear ambitions as an existential threat, has responded with a campaign of sabotage, cyber attacks, and targeted killings, all designed to delay Tehran's progress and disrupt its plans. Both sides have carefully avoided direct war, instead striking each other's assets, supporting rival factions in Syria, Iraq, and beyond, and turning regional conflicts into proxy battlegrounds. At its core, this conflict is deeply ideological. Iran opposes Western influence, with Israel as its most visible symbol. Israel, in turn, frames the Iranian threat as a matter of national survival, rallying its own allies in response. The result is a volatile, unpredictable dynamic, one where military buildups, intelligence operations, and political rhetoric constantly raise the risk that a single miscalculation could trigger open war. For years, both nations have pushed boundaries, testing each other's resolve but always stopping short of direct confrontation, maintaining a fragile and uneasy status quo. But that delicate balance, always precarious, was shattered by a single bold move, sending shockwaves through the region and raising fears of a wider conflict. On June 13, 2025, the world awoke to the unthinkable. The long-feared direct conflict between Israel and Iran had finally erupted, sending shockwaves across the globe and dominating headlines everywhere. In the early hours, Israel launched a massive, coordinated air and missile strike deep inside Iranian territory, targeting key military and nuclear sites with precision and overwhelming force. Israeli officials claimed they had received urgent intelligence indicating Iran was on the very brink of achieving nuclear weapons capability, a red line Israel had long warned it would never allow to be crossed, no matter the cost. This was no mere warning shot or symbolic gesture. It was a decisive, large-scale military operation that instantly shifted the conflict from years of covert shadow war to open, all-out warfare in the heart of the Middle East. Tensions had been steadily escalating for months, fueled by a series of provocations and reprisals, most notably the high-profile assassination of Hezbollah's leader, an act widely attributed to Israeli operatives, which sent shockwaves through the region and set the stage for further violence. The International Atomic Energy Agency's declaration that Iran was in serious non-compliance with nuclear agreements only added fuel to the fire, giving Israel what it saw as undeniable justification for launching a preemptive strike. Iran's leaders responded with fury, vowing swift and devastating retaliation. They promised to open the gates of hell in response to what they called an act of war, rallying their people and allies for a massive response. The world watched in horror and disbelief as both sides unleashed hundreds of drones and missiles, lighting up the night sky and plunging the entire region into its most dangerous and unpredictable crisis in decades. The era of shadow war was over, replaced by direct, brutal confrontation, with the fate of the Middle East and global stability hanging in the balance. Israel's operation aimed to dismantle Iran's nuclear and missile programs, not regime change. Though toppling the regime was seen as a possible bonus. The assault targeted over 80 high-value sites, nuclear facilities, weapons depots, energy infrastructure, and missile launchers. Israel also sought to decapitate Iran's military leadership, claiming to have killed top commanders, including the IRGC's intelligence chief. By eliminating key figures, Israel hoped to sow confusion and disrupt Iran's response. The strikes extended to scientific and symbolic sites, aiming to set back Iran's technological progress. The message was clear: Israel could reach any target, demonstrating overwhelming force to re-establish deterrence. The offensive fundamentally altered the region's strategic balance, forcing Iran onto the defensive. Iran's capacity to threaten Israel and the wider region was severely degraded. Iran responded with unprecedented force, launching hundreds of missiles and drones at Israel, including a daylight raid on Tel Aviv. The attack aimed to terrorize civilians and prove that no part of Israel was safe. Iran activated its regional allies. The Houthis in Yemen joined in, turning the conflict regional. This multi-front assault stretched Israel's air defenses to the limit. Iran's psychological warfare urged Israeli civilians to evacuate, seeking to disrupt daily life and erode public resolve. The scale of retaliation showcased Iran's missile arsenal developed over decades for this scenario. Iran's leadership was determined to prove it could absorb a first strike and still deliver a punishing counterblow. The 2025 conflict was a showcase of advanced military technology, Iran's vast missile arsenal versus Israel's layered air defense. Iran unleashed Shahab-3, Fateh 110, Emad missiles, Sumar cruise missiles, and Shahed drones in coordinated salvos. Israel's Arrow, David's Sling, and Iron Dome systems formed a multi-layered shield, intercepting most threats. But Iran's saturation tactics exposed a vulnerability. Even the best defenses can be overwhelmed by sheer volume. Some missiles inevitably got through, causing unprecedented destruction on Israeli soil. Both sides used electronic warfare, stealth aircraft, and precision-guided munitions, turning the skies into a deadly laboratory for modern warfare. The conflict proved that offensive saturation can challenge even the most advanced defensive shields. The future of warfare was on full display. Despite high-tech weaponry, civilians bore the brunt of the conflict. In Iran, Israeli strikes killed over 220 people, most of them civilians, including dozens in a single apartment block in Tehran. The loss of top nuclear scientists and military leaders dealt a long-term blow to Iran's capabilities. In Israel, Iranian missiles penetrated defenses, killing at least 14 people and striking residential buildings and critical infrastructure. The psychological impact was profound. No part of either country felt safe. Oil refineries, energy facilities, and research centers were hit, crippling key sectors and promising long-term disruption. The destruction of homes and workplaces left millions traumatized with a deep sense of insecurity. The war's legacy shattered lives, economic hardship, and enduring fear. Civilians, as always, paid the highest price. The world reacted with alarm, urging both sides to de-escalate. The US clarified it was not involved in Israel's offensive, but helped intercept Iranian missiles targeting Israel. President Trump warned Iran against attacking American interests, drawing a clear red line. Other leaders, including the UK and UN, called for restraint and immediate ceasefire, citing catastrophic humanitarian risks. Planned US-Iran nuclear talks were cancelled as Iran refused negotiations under fire. The international community found itself largely powerless, watching as diplomacy gave way to military logic. The world could only hope its calls for restraint would be heeded before the conflict spiraled further. The conflict sent shockwaves through global energy markets, exposing the world's dependence on Middle Eastern stability. Israeli strikes on Iranian oil facilities caused Brent crude prices to surge nearly 3%, with similar jumps in US oil benchmarks. Fears of a wider war and disruption of the Strait of Hormuz drove the spike, threatening global supply chains. For economies already struggling with inflation, rising oil prices risked triggering new waves of hardship. The fighting was not just a regional issue, it hit consumers and businesses worldwide. The crisis underscored how global security and economic stability remain tied to the Middle East. The longer the conflict, the greater the risk of a severe global energy crisis. The 2025 war was foreshadowed by a direct Iranian missile attack on Israel in April 2024, a historic first that shattered decades of uneasy deterrence. For the first time, Iran openly launched missiles at Israeli territory, crossing a line that had only been threatened in rhetoric before. Iran's barrage of over 300 projectiles was retaliation for an Israeli strike in Syria that killed senior Iranian commanders. The scale and coordination of the attack stunned observers worldwide, as air raid sirens blared across Israeli cities and civilians rushed to shelters. Israel's air defenses, aided by the US, UK, France, and Jordan, intercepted 99% of the threats, resulting in minimal damage. The unprecedented cooperation between these nations demonstrated the seriousness of the threat and the high stakes involved. Israel's response was Restraint, a limited strike on a military airbase near Isfahan, signaling capability but choosing de-escalation. The message was clear: Israel could strike deep inside Iran, but for now, it would avoid a wider war. This exchange served as a dress rehearsal, testing both sides' capabilities and resolve. Military planners on both sides analyzed every move, preparing for the possibility of a much larger conflict. For Iran, it was a chance to probe Israeli defenses and measure the international response. For Israel, a warning of Iran's willingness to escalate and a test of its alliances. The precedent was set. Direct strikes were now on the table, paving the way for the far deadlier conflict of 2025. The world watched anxiously, aware that the rules of engagement in the region had changed forever. The taboo of direct confrontation was broken, and the stage was set for a new, more dangerous era in the Middle East. The June 2025 confrontation has pushed the Middle East to the brink, shattering old rules and putting civilians in the crossfire. The risk of regional escalation looms. If Hezbollah or US interests are drawn in, the conflict could engulf the entire region. Nuclear escalation is a real danger. Israel's attack may push Iran to pursue a bomb, triggering a regional arms race. The global economy is at risk. Energy disruptions could spark a worldwide crisis. Only urgent diplomacy can pull both sides back from the brink. Without restraint, the conflict risks becoming an endless cycle of violence. The future of the region and global stability depends on finding an off-ramp from this path to mutual destruction.